Fancy therefore, love me too. Your eyes have set me dreaming all night.
Now, Irish research by some used to be called nearly impossible, but thanks to Findmypast's 80 million records online, it's the largest collection of online materials available anywhere, it's possible to unlock the secrets of your Irish family history. Brian Donovan, who has been at the forefront of digitizing Irish family history records for over 15 years, is going to help us navigate the exclusive collections, such as the magistrate court records, the landed estate court rentals, and the prison registers, plus many more at Findmypast. Brian.
Hi, thanks Josh, and welcome to everybody online as well. I want to talk about the really extraordinary things that's happened over the last 10 years. There's been an absolute digital revolution in Irish family history, and Findmypast has been at the forefront of that. People talk a lot about how difficult Irish research is, and I think it's important we just start with that first. The Public Record Office in Dublin was one of the finest archives in Europe, but it was destroyed in 1922. And with that, we lost virtually all of our early 19th century census records. We lost an awful lot of church records, wills, court records. And then on top of that, we had a lot of bureaucratic incompetence, where they actually were destroying records because they weren't considered to be important. And that included all of our late 19th century census records. And other records were destroyed as well. So you come to the point now where you wonder whether is Irish research really possible at all. I mean, there's an example here, an image which you'll be able to see on screen of the destruction of our Public Record Office. So can we do it at all? Well, yes. And the way that Findmypast has found its way through that is two really important things. One, we've gone out and we've sourced new record sources which people traditionally don't use for research. And we've also established really firm partnerships with the major archives and libraries across the island of Ireland. Importantly, the National Archives, local authority archives, companies like Enniclan we've been digitizing for years as well. So we now have the most comprehensive set online overall. But it can be a bit overwhelming for anybody coming to Irish research, because when you actually put in Ireland as a choice of record collections, you're presented with just hundreds of different record collections you could potentially work through. And you really got to try and narrow things down. And I don't really have time to go through every single different type of record collection we have. We don't have time today. We've only 15 minutes. So let's just focus in on some of the key collections. And oddly, for most research, I'm going to start with land records. Land records are really important in Ireland. I mean, they're really important everywhere, but the point is, in Ireland we have more of them because there's a greater obsession with land ownership and land occupation than there was elsewhere in Britain, for example, and also because they're so important of filling the gaps with our lost census records. Many of you will be familiar with the Griffiths valuation, which is a major land tax record from the mid-19th century. Well, we have a full set of that online on Findmypast. We also exclusively have the original Griffiths valuation maps, which allows you to drill right down to the specific plot number or house number your ancestor may have lived in. And that's really important. But exclusively we have online the landed estate court rentals, which are far less known. We all are aware of the tragedy of the Irish famine and how many people lost their lives. Another less-known tragedy for a particular class in Ireland was the landlords who actually started to go bankrupt because they didn't have tenants paying rent. As a consequence, the government was far more concerned about the landlords than the tenants, and they stepped in to bail them out by using this legal structure of the landed estate court to do precisely that. So from 1848 onwards, we have the names of over 500,000 tenants are recorded here, plus the nature of their tenancy. And this covers about 25% of the island of Ireland. We have records about tenants which we'd never find information about anywhere else. These are all tenants you can see on the screen who had a tendency of year by year. They had no lease. They just were allowed to have their land for another year by the landlord each year. And these can really break through the absence of other records. And I'm just going to show you one example of that, which was heavily used by colleagues of ours and our partners in Enniclan, researching the ancestry of President Barack Obama, where the parish registers did not exist. But this record allowed them to jump back 2 or 3 generations to bring them back far actually into the 17th century. And we also have the maps for this set. So the landed estate court records are really important for your research. But we've also tried to bring out other record collections, again to fill in the gaps, but also to tell stories. I mean, we are more than just names and dates. We want to try and tell a family history, a family story. And one of the most important sources for that are the court records. And this is not about identifying criminal ancestors, though they're there too, because the Irish are one of the most litigious countries in the world. In fact, actually, they're only beaten by your own country, Josh. And that's historically always been the case. So we have 33 million court records survive up until 1922. And to put that in context, there are only 20 million birth, marriage, death records that survive. So this is, the amount of court material is huge. And it's civil cases. There are more than 600 courts. And it's wonderfully informative and rich information about your ancestors. Here's an example you'll see on the screen of what a magistrate's court, a petty sessions court, looked like, with the magistrate on the desk on the right-hand side, the recorder on the left at another desk, and that's the local community in that room, arguing their case and dealing with criminal matters as well. And they give you an idea of what these records can tell you. If you look at the example we have on the screen, at the top, it's from 1898 in Templemore in Tipperary, and a sister is bringing her brother to court. And you find out, when it's described here, that the brother had accused his sister of being a witch, and then it goes on to say that she accused him of being a dangerous lunatic. Of course, the result of this case is the poor man was sent to a district lunatic asylum, probably never to be heard of again. But this will give you an idea of just the sort of arguments that go on at a family level, and sure, isn't that all part of family history as well? More examples are road nuisances, drunken disorderly behaviour. That's a lot of cases of drunken disorderly behaviour in Ireland. Unlicensed dogs, and I'll come back to the dogs in a moment. Common assaults, fist-ups outside the pub. I mean, this is the lowest areas of crime happening in the country. Most families will be touched by this in some way or other. And I mentioned the dogs. Well, these dog license books are terribly exciting because the magistrates' courts were supposed to pay for themselves, and they did this by granting licenses. Now, you might think, well, we're not interested in dogs and their genealogy. Well, obviously not, but we are interested in their owners. And at a time when we have so few other records, these dog license books will actually tell us about who were the owners. And of course, most farmers would have had a dog. So here's an example from up in Donegal, where parish registers don't really start till the 1870s or 1880s. And this is a full list of farmers in 1867. That's really important in cracking open an otherwise very, very sparse area for research. And I also mentioned then prison registers. That's another exclusive collection we have online at Findmypast. And there are 2.7 million prisoners recorded for the 19th century in Ireland. I mean, it's much higher than you'd expect in most countries in Europe. We have over 100,000 sentences per annum. It's quite dramatic. And the information that they contain is really, really important. Now, you get the names, obviously, you get the ages of the people in there, but you get their eye colour, their hair colour, their complexion. You actually find out what height they were, what weight they were, exactly where they were born, where they last lived, their next of kin's name, and you find out, of course, information about the crime they may have committed. And in some cases, an example on screen here in the middle, it tells you that the person assaulted an Ellen Mia of Kappa. So you get the name of the victim and her address in that case as well. And we've indexed all of this information, not just the prisoners. We've also indexed their family members, the other names that might appear here as well. So you're getting a very rich, rounded view of this. The prison system was also responsible for some rudimentary medical activities as well. Probably most interestingly, it dealt with the National Inebriate Reformatory. This was a national institution to deal with drunkenness in Ireland. But they're tragic stories that you read in here, but the information is incredibly detailed. And on screen you'll see that each individual inmate had 2 full pages of information about them, about their life story, their family story, and then after they've been released, what happened to them. They were tracked year by year by the various police stations in the country, and that's all recorded as well. And of course, being Irish records, most of our Irish listeners are particularly interested in their rebel ancestors, and of course they're well covered by the prison registers too. The example we have on screen here is of Robert Emmet and his compatriots in the failed rising in the early 19th century, who all unfortunately ended up meeting their maker with execution. But more traditional records, we have full index of birth, marriage and death records for Ireland from 1864 onwards. We've tried to do some interesting things with this collection online, which you probably won't see easily elsewhere. We've been very interested in trying to understand locations and registration of birth, marriages and deaths, because Irish registration districts, unlike those in England and Wales, tended to not follow county boundaries. They tend to be quite tricky for people coming to them. So we've got a lovely map online which will actually show you precisely how they work, and it'll help you try and identify the right case. We've also brought in a marriage finder, which is a particular utility on Findmypast that you won't find anywhere else. which will allow you to actually identify the most likely marriage for your research. And where we can get them, we have scanned images of the original records too. For example, we have one lovely project we did in County Down in Northern Ireland, where we managed to persuade all denominations to provide us with their parish registers and scan them in full colour and make them available online. We've also got the largest collection of wills. As I was saying, all these wills were destroyed in 1922, but there were many indexes created and abstracts of these wills, and we have these all online too, so we're very proud of that. And most recently, we started to open up pre-1901 census records, because we all think they're destroyed, but not everything was destroyed. It's often the case. And we've now got over 600,000 original census records from the early 19th century surviving. And many of you out there won't have ever seen that or known that in 1821 there was a full census in Ireland, not just a head of household name census, but a full name census. It mostly survives for County Cavan. Well, this is now all available online, not just online on Findmypast, but online for free on Findmypast. You also see Derry, London Derry has most of their census records survive from 1831. We have many survivals from 41 and 51, and so on. But we're particularly pleased about bringing online the census search forms. Now, when they brought in the pension in Ireland in 1908, you had to prove you were 70. But civil registration didn't start till 1864, so how could you do that? You had to have an extract made of the census records to prove your age. And these all survived, so you were able to extract these indexes and put them online too. We have many, many more records as well. I don't really have much time to go through all of these, so I'll just flip through some of them. We have newspapers, we've discussed that earlier on. We have a comprehensive collection of emigration records from Ireland from 1890 onwards. That's for the entire island up until 1922 and for Northern Ireland after that. We have the biggest collection of directories online anywhere. Lots of examples of that on your screen at the moment. And as has been described by Paul earlier on as well, we've got the largest collection of military records for Ireland as well as Britain, because of course the Irish were a huge component of the British Army. We're increasingly looking at records relating to the parallel development in Ireland during World War I, which is the War of Independence in Ireland, very important too. We have many, many record sets which are going to be coming online now the next while. Again, I don't have enough time to go through them in detail, but I'd like to pick out a few examples just to whet your appetite and get you excited. Very soon we're going to have the Valuation Office Field and House books. I mentioned Griffith earlier on. These are about 10, 15 years earlier than Griffith and are as comprehensive. In fact, there's even more names in these records. We have the surviving will indexes and marriage license bond indexes. We've got the entire records of the merchant marine in Ireland, all of those who were working on ships across the country. The Catholic qualification rolls, this was a public statement by Catholics that they were loyal and therefore could own land or occupy land, or the public convert rolls, which also when they converted religion they had to do that publicly. All of these records are going to be online very soon. And we also have full transcripts of all the wills after 1858. They're all going to be going online very soon too. But one of the things we're most excited about is a little-known record set officially called the Irish Reproductive Loan Fund, which are microloans, philanthropic microloans made by the wealthy of Britain and Ireland to the poor of the west of Ireland. And these were done in the 1820s and 30s. And hundreds of thousands of these loans were made to people you would otherwise find nothing about. They're small farmers, they're tradesmen, dealers, shopkeepers, and we have full details of what was lent to them. So it was like £1 or even just 10 shillings. But most interestingly, in the 1850s, they came back to find out what had happened to the loans. And this really is the telltale sign of one of the big events in Ireland, because I have an example here on the screen. And you'll notice in the right-hand column, it details exactly what's happened to these people. And apart from the first person, which they couldn't track down, they may never have existed, every other person in here has emigrated, been transported for some crime, or has died. And in a couple of the cases here, they specifically say they've died of starvation. So this is the big gaping hole in the middle of the 19th century in Ireland, the famine. And this record set's going to really completely crack that open for research. Thank you, Josh.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian. The questions are piling in, so let's get started with as many as we can. We only have a few moments.
Okay.
But the first question is, how do you find birth, marriage, and death records for Ireland in the early to mid-1800s?
The early to mid-1800s. Well, we have records from 1864. Prior to that, there's no civil registration. Well, the civil registration of non-Catholic marriages from 1845. But for everybody else, we're actually reliant on using either parish registers or using other source material like these land surveys and so on that exist. So if we're looking for parish registers, there's quite a lot of parish register information that's available out there online for free, so it's worthwhile having a look for that too.
Okay, great. So the next question is that this customer's Irish ancestors immigrated to the US in 1792. So the more recent records that we talked about aren't going to help them. Yeah. So they're wondering, are there records of immigration records, or what would help them in this case?
Well, one of the things to remember is prior to American independence, they weren't going to a different country. They were going to the same country, just another branch of the empire. So there's no official requirement to keep immigration records. However, there are many other sources that can be looked at. But the first thing I always say to anybody doing research in America, you need to do the research there first. You need to know as much as you can about your immigrant ancestor before you start diving into the Irish records. Otherwise, you'll probably be not as successful as you could be.
All right. So to find records in the 1800s in Ireland, do you have to know what parish they belong to? And if you don't know, how do you find out?
Well, it's the more information you have about locality, it's really helpful. But if you've got an unusual surname, you can probably avoid some of the worst of that. Again, I come back to the question of making sure you've done enough research at home first and checking out those obituaries and local census records in the US and the UK to find out if you get a place of origin. But if you don't have that, start searching the Griffith valuation on Findmypast. Start actually mapping the distribution of a surname in the mid-19th century, and you'll start getting a sense of where they're likely to be turning up. And if you're lucky and your name is a little bit less, it's not the most common surname, you might actually be able to pinpoint things a bit more accurately than you've done already.
All right, so we have time for one more question.
Okay.
This one's been asked a couple times. So they've noticed that passenger records from Ireland after 1921 are not on Findmypast.
Correct.
And why is that, and what can they use to find records of those leaving Ireland after 1921?
Okay. Well, first of all, I should actually clarify what I said. There are records for the part of Ireland that stayed within the UK, Northern Ireland. But there was no maintenance of that record set by the Republic or by the Free State as it was originally before it became the Republic in 1949. But those record sets just simply weren't kept by the state, so they don't exist at all. But there are records then later on for passports from the Irish state, but they're not available online as yet. There's a problem when you start dealing with later 20th century records of trying to get agreements from data protection officers and everything else to get them out. But we do our best to try.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian. It's been great. And as I said, Brian will be on Facebook later and we'll answer as many Irish questions as we can.
Thank you.
We'll take a break and be back with our last presentation of the day.